The Heist of the Mona Lisa, 1911. It was a quiet Monday morning on August 21, 1911, when Vincenzo Peruggia walked into the Louvre in Paris. At the time, the Mona Lisa was admired, but it was not yet the world's most famous painting. It hung modestly on a wall in the Salon Carré, with little security around it. Peruggia, a 30-year-old Italian handyman, had once worked at the museum installing protective glass on paintings, and he knew the layout and security procedures well. He also knew that Mondays were the perfect time to strike, because the Louvre was closed to the public for maintenance. Peruggia's plan was audacious but shockingly simple. Dressed in a white smock like those worn by museum employees, he entered the museum early that morning and made his way to the Mona Lisa's display. He knew that the guards wouldn't question a worker handling paintings, and they didn't. At some point when the coast was clear, he lifted the Mona Lisa from its wall mount, removed it from its protective case, and tucked the wooden panel under his smock. He then walked straight out of the museum with the world's most famous painting hidden under his arm. Once outside, he calmly made his way to his small apartment in Paris. No one stopped him. No alarms were triggered. It would take an entire day before anyone even noticed that the Mona Lisa was missing. When the museum finally realized what had happened, it was too late. The thief was long gone. News of the theft spread like wildfire. At the time, the Mona Lisa was admired, but not yet an icon. Ironically, it was her disappearance that propelled her to worldwide fame. The Louvre was in chaos. The police were baffled. A massive investigation was launched, and every possible suspect was questioned. The museum even shut down for a full week as investigators searched every inch of the building, hoping the painting had been hidden somewhere inside. The authorities were so desperate that they even interrogated Pablo Picasso, who was rumored to have connections to art thieves. But the real thief, Peruggia, was sitting quietly in his tiny Parisian apartment with the Mona Lisa hidden in a wooden trunk. For over 2 years, Peruggia kept the Mona Lisa in his possession. He never tried to sell it, nor did he destroy it. He believed he was on a patriotic mission, to return Da Vinci's masterpiece to Italy. In his mind, the Mona Lisa had been wrongfully taken from his homeland by the French, and he was simply bringing it back where it belonged. Then, in December 1913, Peruggia made a crucial mistake. He contacted an art dealer in Florence, hoping to return the Mona Lisa in exchange for a reward. The dealer, suspicious, agreed to meet him. When Peruggia pulled the painting from its hiding place and presented it as the real Mona Lisa, the dealer immediately alerted the police. Within hours, the Italian authorities raided Peruggia's hotel room and recovered the stolen masterpiece. When news broke that the Mona Lisa had been found, Italy was swept up in a wave of national pride. Many Italians saw Peruggia not as a criminal, but as a hero who had tried to reclaim a stolen piece of their cultural heritage. During his trial, he defended himself passionately, insisting that he had never meant to commit a crime, only to right a historical wrong. The French authorities, however, were not so sympathetic. Peruggia was convicted of theft, but due to his supposed patriotic motives and the lack of prior criminal history, he received a light sentence of just 1 year and 15 days in prison. Meanwhile, the Mona Lisa was returned to France, where she was placed back in the Louvre under tighter security than ever before. By then, she had become a worldwide sensation. The theft had given her a mystique unlike any other artwork in history. Crowds swarmed to see the painting that had once vanished in plain sight, and from that moment on, the Mona Lisa's status as the most famous painting in the world was sealed. Today, the Mona Lisa remains one of the most heavily protected paintings in existence, encased in bulletproof glass and constantly monitored. The idea that a single man could walk into the Louvre and simply steal her is almost unthinkable now. But in 1911, that's exactly what happened. one of the most unbelievable and daring art thefts in history. The Great Train Robbery, 1963. The night of August 7, 1963, seemed like any other for the British Postal Service, as a Royal Mail train traveled from Glasgow to London carrying mail, parcels, and, most importantly, cash. What no one knew was that this night would go down in history as one of the most daring and meticulously planned heists ever. A gang of criminals led by Bruce Reynolds was about to pull off what became known as the Great Train Robbery, stealing £2.6 million, an amount equivalent to over £50 million today. The plan was crafted with military-level precision. The gang, consisting of 15 men, had spent months gathering intelligence, observing train schedules, and perfecting every move. They knew that this particular train carried large sums of cash from banks in Scotland to the Bank of England in London. The money was meant to be securely transported, but the criminals had discovered a weakness in the system. Only a few railway workers guarded the train, and there were no armed officers on board. In the early hours of August 8th, the gang took their positions near Bridego Bridge in Buckinghamshire. They had already tampered with the railway signals, turning them from green to red to stop the train in its tracks. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the train driver, Jack Mills, saw the red signal and brought the train to a halt. It was the moment the robbers had been waiting for. Wearing dark clothes and ski masks, the gang swiftly moved in. Their first target was the driver. As Mills leaned out of his cabin to inspect the signal problem, he was ambushed. The robbers knocked him unconscious, ensuring that he could not resist. Next, they forced the co-driver to move the train a little further down the track, where they had prepared a hidden location to load the stolen cash. Within minutes, the gang was inside the high-value packages HVP coach, where the money was stored. The mail workers inside were overwhelmed and forced to the ground as the criminals took control. Using bags and trolleys, the gang rapidly emptied the coach of all the cash, stacking it into a nearby truck. They worked efficiently, communicating in coded language and ensuring that they wasted no time. In total, they stole 120 mail sacks, packed with untraceable banknotes, most of them in £1 and £5 denominations. Amazingly, the entire robbery took just 30 minutes. Once the bags were loaded into their truck, the gang vanished into the night, leaving behind a stunned crew and a train stranded in the middle of nowhere. By the time the police were alerted, the criminals were already miles away, heading toward their safe house, a secluded farmhouse in Leatherslade. At the hideout, the robbers celebrated their success. They had just pulled off the biggest cash heist in British history. And the best part? The money they stole was untraceable. There were no serial numbers recorded for the banknotes, making it nearly impossible for authorities to track them. However, despite the perfect execution of the robbery itself, their next moves would lead to their downfall. The gang had planned to lay low for several weeks before splitting up and disappearing, but a small mistake at their hideout turned into a major disaster. The farmhouse they had chosen as their base had been rented under an alias, and the gang had left behind fingerprints on plates, glasses, and playing cards. They had also failed to properly burn evidence, leaving behind documents that linked them to the crime. Within weeks, police investigators found the abandoned farmhouse and matched fingerprints to known criminals. From there, one arrest led to another, and eventually, most of the gang was captured. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind, managed to evade capture for 5 years, but he too was eventually caught. In total, 12 of the 15 gang members were sentenced to a combined 307 years in prison. The train driver, Jack Mills, never fully recovered from the injuries he suffered during the attack, and the event haunted him for the rest of his life. Despite the mass arrests, not all of the money was ever recovered. It is believed that some of the stolen cash was hidden or spent before the police could seize it. The Great Train Robbery remains one of the most infamous crimes in British history, not just for the sheer amount of money stolen, but for the way it was carried out, with intelligence, precision, and a level of planning that rivaled a Hollywood movie. Even today, legends and conspiracy theories surround the case. Some believe that a portion of the gang escaped justice and lived in secret with their share of the fortune. Others think the heist had secret backing from criminal organizations that were never exposed. One thing is certain: the Great Train Robbery remains one of the most daring and unbelievable real-life thefts in history. The theft of the Amber Room, 1941, deep within the Catherine Palace of Tsarskoye Selo, near St. Petersburg, Russia. There once existed a room so magnificent that it was often referred to as the eighth wonder of the world, the Amber Room. It was a dazzling chamber, its walls covered in over 6 tons of pure amber, decorated with gold leaf, mirrors, and precious stones. Originally crafted in Prussia in the early 18th century, the room was gifted to Peter the Great of Russia in 1716 and later expanded into a breathtaking masterpiece. For centuries, the Amber Room was a symbol of Russian royalty, but during World War II, this priceless treasure vanished without a trace in one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of stolen art. The trouble began in June 1941 when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The advancing German army stormed through Russian cities, looting palaces and museums for valuable artifacts. Among their most prized targets was the Amber Room. As the Nazis approached, Soviet officials desperately attempted to hide the room's treasure. They tried to dismantle the amber panels, but due to years of fragility and decay, the delicate amber pieces began to crumble. Instead, the caretakers covered the walls with wallpaper, hoping to disguise the room as just another ordinary chamber. But the Nazis were not fooled. In September 1941, German soldiers entered the Catherine Palace and discovered the hidden treasure. Within days, they had carefully removed the amber panels, packed them into crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, modern-day Kaliningrad, Russia. There, the Amber Room was reassembled and put on display in a museum under Nazi control. For 2 years, the stolen Amber Room remained in Königsberg. But as the war turned against Germany, the Nazis feared losing their stolen treasures. By 1944, as Soviet forces advanced toward Königsberg, the Amber Room was once again packed into crates. And then it simply vanished. What happened next remains one of the greatest art mysteries of all time. Some reports suggest that the Amber Room was loaded onto the German ship Wilhelm Gustloff, which was later sunk by Soviet submarines in January 1945. If true, the Amber Room now rests at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Others believe that Hitler ordered it hidden in a secret underground bunker, still waiting to be found. Over the years, treasure hunters and historians have searched abandoned Nazi tunnels, mines, and caves across Germany, Poland, and Russia, hoping to uncover its resting place. Despite countless investigations, no trace of the original Amber Room has ever been found. In the 1970s, Soviet authorities decided to rebuild the Amber Room from scratch, using photographs and historical records as guides. The process took over 24 years, with artisans carefully recreating every detail. In 2003, on the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg, the newly reconstructed Amber Room was finally unveiled in the Catherine Palace. To this day, the original remains one of the greatest lost treasures of World War II. Whether it was destroyed in a bombing, hidden away in a secret vault, or lost at sea, the fate of the Amber Room continues to baffle historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists alike. The Heist of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, 1990. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, while Boston was still recovering from St. Patrick's Day celebrations, 2 men disguised as police officers arrived at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. The Grand Museum, known for housing some of the world's most precious art, had always been considered secure, with multiple alarm systems and security personnel on duty. But what happened that night would become the biggest unsolved art heist in history, with a staggering $500 million worth of artwork disappearing into the night, never to be recovered. At around 1:24 a.m., the two fake officers rang the museum's side entrance buzzer. When the night guards saw them on surveillance cameras, they didn't hesitate to let them in. After all, they looked like Boston police officers investigating a possible disturbance. Once inside, the thieves acted fast. Instead of conducting an inspection, they immediately overpowered the two security guards, handcuffing them and duct taping their mouths, hands, and feet. The guards were taken to the basement, where they were tied to pipes. With the only two people capable of stopping them now out of the way, the thieves had full control of the museum. For the next 81 minutes, the criminals moved through the galleries with shocking precision, as if they had studied the museum's layout beforehand. They cut priceless paintings from their frames, leaving jagged edges of canvas behind. Among the stolen works were Johannes Vermeer's The Concert, Rembrandt's Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, and Edgar Degas' sketches, some of the rarest artworks in existence. Perhaps the most puzzling theft was a bronze eagle-shaped finial that sat atop a Napoleonic flag. While they ignored some of the museum's most valuable pieces, their final haul included 13 artworks in total. By the time the morning staff arrived, the damage was done. The empty frames still hung on the walls, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Police arrived, but the thieves were already long gone. The FBI launched an extensive investigation, offering a $10 million reward for any information leading to the artwork's recovery. Over the years, investigators pursued multiple leads, from the Boston Mafia to international art smugglers, but no arrests were ever made. The most famous theory suggests that New England mobsters were involved, possibly using the art as bargaining chips for reduced prison sentences. Some believed the paintings were hidden in secret locations, possibly even buried. Decades later, the case remains one of the greatest mysteries in the art world. Despite numerous tips and alleged sightings of the stolen artwork, not a single piece has ever been recovered. To this day, the empty frames still hang in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, waiting for the stolen masterpieces to return, if they ever do. The Theft of the Crown Jewels of Ireland, 1907. On the morning of July 6, 1907, officials at Dublin Castle were preparing for an important royal visit. The prestigious Order of St. Patrick, the Irish equivalent of Britain's Order of the Garter, was set to hold a grand ceremony. However, as officials entered the secure room where the crown jewels of Ireland were kept, they made a shocking discovery. The jewels were gone. The theft was one of the most scandalous and mysterious crimes in British and Irish history. The stolen treasures included a star, badge, and collars of the Order of St. Patrick, encrusted with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. The collection was worth over £1 million in today's money, but more than the monetary loss, the heist was an embarrassment to the British government. The crown jewels had been kept inside the strong room of Bedford Tower at Dublin Castle, protected by a 6-inch thick steel safe. The safe was supposed to be under constant guard, and only 2 keys could open it, one held by Sir Arthur Vickers, the custodian of the jewels, and the other supposedly locked in his office. However, when the theft was discovered, there was no sign of forced entry, and both keys were missing. This immediately led investigators to suspect an inside job. As the investigation unfolded, a web of neglect, betrayal, and secrecy was revealed. The castle had been notorious for its lack of discipline among staff. Reports surfaced of late-night parties, drinking, and unauthorized people entering the strong room, including guests of Sir Arthur Vickers himself. It was even rumored that copies of the keys had been made, making it easier for someone close to Vickers to steal the jewels without leaving a trace. The scandal quickly became a political disaster. With tensions already rising between Ireland and Britain, nationalist groups mocked the British authorities for losing control of their own royal symbols. King Edward VII was furious, and an official inquiry was launched. Sir Arthur Vickers was the primary suspect, not necessarily as the thief, but for his gross negligence. Despite his insistence that he was innocent, he was publicly disgraced and forced to resign. He later moved to the countryside, where he spent the rest of his life bitterly denying any involvement. But the biggest mystery remains: what happened to the crown jewels? Over the years, theories have emerged. The jewels were stolen by British intelligence to create an excuse to remove Irish officials from power. They were taken by Irish nationalists, possibly linked to the Irish Republican Brotherhood, to embarrass the British crown. A lover's betrayal. Some believe an aristocratic romantic scandal led to the theft, with the jewels stolen as part of blackmail or revenge. They were smuggled out of Ireland and sold, possibly hidden in private collections or dismantled and sold as separate gems. Despite decades of investigations, the jewels have never been recovered. The crown jewels of Ireland vanished without a trace, and to this day, no one has ever been charged for the crime. More than 100 years later, the case remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history, a legend of greed, betrayal, and royal embarrassment that haunts Dublin Castle to this day. The theft of the sapphires from the Star of India, 1964. In the early hours of October 29, 1964, a daring heist took place at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, one that would go down as one of the most brazen jewel thefts in history. In a crime that seemed straight out of Hollywood, a group of thieves managed to break into the museum and steal some of the world's most precious gemstones, including the legendary Star of India, a stunning 563-carat sapphire, along with several other rare jewels worth over $400,000 at the time, equivalent to millions today. The mastermind behind the heist was Jack Murphy, a notorious jewel thief and surfer better known as Murph the Surf. Along with two accomplices, Alan Kuhn and Roger Clark, Murphy planned the robbery with military-like precision. The trio had a knack for high-risk heists, but what made this one unique was its sheer audacity. They intended to steal from one of the most well-guarded museums in the world. Their first step was casing the museum, posing as visitors to study its security system. They quickly realized a shocking flaw. Despite housing some of the world's most valuable gems, the museum's security was outdated and careless. There were no alarm systems on the display cases, and at night, only a single guard patrolled the massive building. Under the cover of darkness, the thieves scaled the museum walls, using a rope to climb up the outside of the building. They found an open window on the 4th floor, left unlocked by mistake, and slipped inside. Avoiding the lone security guard, they made their way to the Hall of Gems and Minerals, where the world's most famous sapphires and rubies were displayed. Once inside, they smashed open several glass display cases, grabbing handfuls of priceless gems, including the Star of India, the world's largest sapphire, famous for its deep blue color and a star-like reflection formed by natural inclusions. The Midnight Star, a black sapphire of stunning beauty. The DeLong Star Ruby, a rare and flawless 100-carat ruby. After stuffing their bags with jewels, the thieves retraced their steps, slipping out of the museum the same way they had entered. The entire robbery had taken just 20 minutes, and by the time the museum opened in the morning, the thieves were already far away. When the museum discovered the theft, it was a national scandal. The missing Star of India alone was so famous that newspapers across the country covered the heist. Investigators were baffled at how such a high-profile institution had been so easily infiltrated. The police, under immense pressure to solve the case, began tracking down known jewel thieves. Less than 48 hours later, the investigation led them to a Miami hotel where Murphy and his crew had checked in. The criminals, celebrating their successful heist, had become careless. A police raid on their hotel room uncovered stolen cash, weapons, and flight tickets suggesting they planned to flee the country. Under questioning, the thieves quickly broke. They confessed to the crime, revealing that the stolen gems had been hidden in a Miami bus station locker. Within days, the police recovered most of the jewels, including the Star of India, which was found intact. However, some of the stolen gems, such as the DeLong Star ruby, had already been sold on the black market. It was eventually recovered after an anonymous buyer paid a ransom of $25,000 to return it. Murphy, Kuhn, and Clark were sentenced to prison, though they served only a few years due to plea deals. After his release, Jack Murphy became a controversial figure, turning into a motivational speaker and prison reform advocate, even though he was later convicted of other crimes. The Star of India was returned to its rightful place in the museum, where it remains on display to this day. However, the security at the American Museum of Natural History was forever changed. New alarms, stricter surveillance, and reinforced glass were installed, ensuring that such a heist would never happen again. The Star of India heist remains one of the most infamous jewel thefts in history, proving that even the most secure institutions can fall victim to thieves with boldness, skill, and a little bit of luck.